Hello, Chameleon Academy. This is Bill Strand. Welcome to the Chameleon Academy show, where we're going to be going over all sorts of great chameleon stuff. And I'm very excited that in this episode, I have a co-host in Mike Taitula. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hello, Bill, and welcome everybody from the audience. I'm Mike Taitula, and I'm here to help Bill along this beautiful journey today.
Yeah, you know what, Mike? There may be some poor souls out there who haven't had the pleasure of seeing your channel. So for those poor unfortunate souls, let's go ahead and give an introduction as to who you are and what you do.
I am Mike Taitula. I am a reptile hobbyist in general. I have kept quite a few chameleons in the past. Unfortunately, right now, I do not have any currently, but that will soon change, hopefully. So hopefully that'll soon change, especially after today's episode that you guys are watching. And predominantly on my channel, I focus on a lot of like bioactive builds. I focus on some room tours as well. So I really enjoy the idea of sharing diversity in the reptile community and showing that the community is not all veiled chameleons, ball pythons, and crested geckos. There's a lot of other very cool animals out there that are achievable, easy to keep, and you can make a room that looks exactly like what you guys see in the video.
Yeah, this guy has over 650 videos, so Mike's been around for a while. So when did you start?
I started when I was 14. I started in August of 2012. Yeah, I've been doing it for 12 years.
20. Okay, that has been around for a while.
Or 2010, I guess that would make it.
2010, yeah, that gives you 12 years there, 2010.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
All right. Well, it is very good to have you here and being the co-host. And let's get into our first segment where we are going to be talking about laying bins. And have you ever had chameleons lay eggs for you?
I have, actually. When I was towards the beginning of my channel, I successfully produced 2 clutches of veiled chameleon eggs. So I did go through the misery that at the time was making lay bins.
Well, how did you make it? And was this back in 2010?
I don't know if it was probably 2012 or 2014, somewhere around there. Maybe 2015, something like that. And I basically scoured the internet, well, YouTube mostly, to try and find some version of a lay bin. And what I ended up finding was essentially a tub that fit in your tank that was, I ended up using about a 12-inch tall Stairlight tub and just put that right into the chameleon cage, and she laid in there. I know at the time there was also a lot of information saying that you would have to like take them out and put them in like either a small brute trash can or like a 5-gallon pail with a little heat lamp or something over it. But I found putting it in the cage worked fairly well.
Okay. Well, Mike, veiled chameleons, panther chameleons, they tend to lay pretty easily. But there are some species that are real pains in the backside, and they can be as picky as little divas. And so this next segment is going to be making the ultimate laying bin. So for those picky chameleons, this is going to do it. So let's go ahead and roll this. Hello, chameleon wranglers. Today we're going to be talking about making the ultimate laying bin. Sure, a number of your chameleon species will lay in whatever is around. Panther chameleons, veiled chameleons, they just as soon take the nearest potted plant and lay their eggs in that one. But there are some sensitive species and more picky individuals that will require a little bit more attention. And so what I've done is I've come up with a laying bin design that incorporates a number of different elements that will hopefully appease your very picky chameleon. So first, let's go over what your chameleon's looking for. They're looking for a place that they can dig that they feel safe in. A chameleon coming down to the ground is a nervous time in itself, but then to spend the entire day digging a hole and then laying eggs and then covering the hole back up, she is going to want to find a place that has privacy. Second, she's going to want soil that she can dig through. Now, we in captivity tend to give them this perfect 50% soil, 50% sand, or some combination of that, and that makes it easy for them to dig through. But they are actually looking for a hard packed surface about 3 to 4 inches down that they can lay their eggs against. Usually in captivity, that's the bottom of our laying bin. This is an important thing to know because in the past we've seen them dig down to the bottom of the bin and we've decided, oh, they want to dig further, and so we give them a 12-inch bucket to dig in. At the worst, they can lead to tunneling, tunnel collapse, be deadly for your chameleon, and at the best, it just makes them work that much harder to be able to lay their eggs. So what I do is I get a bin that's going to fit into the cage that's only about 5 to 6 inches deep. And I plan to only give them about 4 to 5 inches of soil depth to dig through. Now, for this to become the ultimate laying bin, we're going to have to include some different topographies in there to appease the most selective of chameleons. So having a very easy soil to dig through that will hold its shape is the first thing, and that I use a 50% play sand and 50% soil mixture. Play sand is something you can get from your home improvement store, and for the soil I get any organic soil. I just don't want all those little fertilizer pellets in there. I mix it together in a 50-50 mixture, and I moisten it, and then I make a little hole and just make sure it's easy to dig through and it's easy to make a hole. Now, before I put the sand in this bin, I want to put a couple of things down in the bin, and the first thing I want to do is put in a live plant, because some chameleons want to find a root ball. We don't know why they do this, and not every chameleon does this, and so this is one of those things where we're just going to put it in there because some chameleons want it. So in one corner goes a live plant with the root ball, and then I put some round, smooth stones in there that will give different depths to the laying bin. Now, you may argue, how does she know that? She's going to start digging in one place, and whatever she finds, she finds. Well, this is for the behavior of when they do test holes. So sometimes a female will dig a hole and then not like it and go dig a hole in another place to see if she likes it there. And so what I'm giving in this varying levels of depth is if she does dig multiple holes, she will find something different if she digs in a different part of this laying bin. So once I have my plant in the corner, I have my stones at the bottom. If I'm doing a panther chameleon, I'm doing different depths of, say, 3 inches to 5 inches. And that should do it quite nicely for a panther chameleon or a veiled chameleon. And so once I have all of my hidden topographies down there, I'm going to fill it with this sand soil mixture. Once I fill it with the sand soil, I'm actually going to be sprinkling a light layer of sand along the top of the entire laying bin. And the reason for this is that I will be able to see where the dirt is disturbed when the female digs the hole. I am often surprised at how good females are at making that hole hard to find. And so this is one way of making it easy to find. Now, I also incorporate another strategy in which I use a clear bin and then I wrap a black trash bag around it. And so there's no light coming in. So when she digs down, she's not going to all of a sudden dig down to the bottom and have light come through. But what this does is after she's laid, all I have to do is take that trash bag off the laying bin and I will most likely be able to see where those eggs are. As I said, she lays against a hard surface, and so she's going to lay against the sides of the container. Between the disturbed sand and being able to see where the eggs are, it's not going to be a problem to know exactly where to dig. And so those are the elements of the ultimate laying bin. And really, okay, I use the word ultimate tongue-in-cheek, but what we're doing here is we're giving options to the female. I'll admit, when I use these with my panther chameleons, she's just as likely to just turn her tail up at me and go lay eggs in a potted plant and ignore my perfect laying bin. But when I get to other species that are a little bit more picky maybe, like Cristatus or Daramensis, these laying bins have come in handy. Now, many people use simpler versions of this laying bed. They just use a sand-dirt mixture, and that's fine. I'm not saying you have to do the plant, you have to do the rocks and all that kind of stuff. I'm just giving it to you as an option, and if you want to do it, you want to go all out, have at it. That's what I do. Sometimes they want it, sometimes they don't. But you know what? For the ones that want it, it's there. Thanks for joining me here, and I wish your chameleons happy laying. All right, so there you go. A little bit on the ultimate laying bin for those really picky chameleons. What do you think, Mike?
Yes, I want to say that was a great video. I definitely learned a lot. Definitely the progression from back 10 years ago when I was breeding them to that video would have been much, much better, and makes a lot of sense because, you know, we provided all of the space for our chameleons to dig, but you made a good point in saying that they don't need all that space. They're looking for that hard surface, and I really love the idea of having the root ball in there as well as some rocks to provide the different layers. Fantastic.
And Mike, I got to say, I'm actually embarrassed how long it took me to figure this out because, I had like 12-inch laying bins for my veiled chameleons. I remember having to go out. I had an outdoor setup, and I gave that chameleon 12 inches of the finest. The entire bottom of the cage was 12 inches of the finest sand, soil mixture. And I went out. I couldn't find her. Well, she had actually dug down all the way down through all that soil, and the tunnel collapsed on her.
Oh, no.
And you know, you go and you look in a cage, and you don't always see your chameleon. And I'm okay if I don't see my chameleon for 3 days because that's a chameleon. And so I'm just lucky that I said, hey, wait a minute. She was down here, and I'm just really surprised. And so I thought to go down and check, and sure enough, she was down under there under a collapsed tunnel. She was fine, very angry, but that's just, it goes to say it's unfortunate that it just took us in the community so long to figure out that we had interpreted the situation incorrectly. And all we were doing was tiring out our poor females in a day that is already way too strenuous. So it's just one of those things. We always have to keep growing, always have to challenge what we think we know, and just keep going. I mean, everything we know now, in 10 years, we'll be laughing at.
Absolutely. And I think it makes sense, like retroactively thinking about it now that we have the ultimate lay bin set up. I think it really does make sense that, you know, most pictures you see of females laying eggs, whether it's a panther or any other species, most of the time they do have their heads sticking out of their hole. So it is only 3, 4, 5 inches down. And it makes sense because predators, like there are predators that exist and they need to keep their watch out for said predators. So I think it's I mean, think about it now, it makes sense, but back 10 years ago, clearly nobody had that thought yet.
You know, we were all trying the best we could, and that's the way we discover things, is we figure out something that works, and it takes a while before we question it because we're just glad that we found something that works. So,
yep.
All part of the process.
Indeed. It's
right.
The evolution of the hobby. Gotta love it.
and actually, it's great how much the hobby is growing and how much we're learning, and how much, since I started the podcast, how much I have grown personally. And I mean, when I start on the podcast, I talk about how I've done this for almost 40 years. Well, that's when I started the podcast. Now it's over 40 years. But I have grown more during the time of doing the podcast than the entire 40 years before the podcast. It's just actively challenging everything that I think I've known and bringing in often on a weekly basis, other ideas and perspectives from around the world has been an incredible growth experience.
And that's something that has come in recent years, too, with us doing this. We're sitting here talking to each other, even though we're all the way across a continent from each other. It really has opened up with the advent of Instagram and Facebook groups and stuff like that, seeing those people who live in Madagascar or work in Madagascar and parts of Africa as well that are taking photos of chameleons laying or chameleons in their natural habitat, that are taking those data points and making note of, oh, you know, there's this much rain, it's this temperature where they're actually sitting, not, oh, well, it's 50 degrees Celsius in Africa right now. It's like, well, okay, it's not everywhere in Africa that it's 50 degrees Celsius. So I think it's very cool seeing how the hobby has changed, even in my time. It has not been 40 years for me, but it's been it has been about 2 decades since I've been in the hobby, and it's exactly the same thing. Like, I grew up trying to find information, and now having so much available at our fingertips is just incredible.
Yeah. All right, Mike. Well, let me tell you about us chameleon people when we have to bring in the wild caught. Okay, all right. I gotta step back and say, anybody listening to the Chameleon Academy knows that I say, just get yourself a captive hatched. That is the perfect thing to do. Captive hatched are so much easier to work with, and they're acclimated, and they don't necessarily see us as something to be afraid of. They see us as something that annoys them and brings food. So, okay, so they're just, get a captive hatched individual from a breeder. But there may come a time where you decide, hey, I want to get involved with a rarer species and start a breeding project with this rare species. And if you do that, then you'll probably be looking at getting in a wild caught. And Mike, have you done much with acclimating wild caught chameleons or reptiles?
Chameleons, no. In terms of reptiles, a little bit here and there. I have had several friends / mentors almost that are very well versed in, especially snakes, like emerald tree boas and things, different pythons and such. Wow. But no, not a whole lot of chameleons. No.
Okay, well, it's not much different. You have all of the cleanliness issues, you have the parasites, you have all the pathogens that could happen, and so you have to have a quarantine. So it's pretty similar. But of course, we're talking about chameleons here, so this is going to be a chameleon-centric segment, to where I want to talk about how to create a cage if you're acclimating a chameleon, and you want to have a cage that is effective, both for giving them the sense of security, but also effective to allow you to maintain some sort of hygiene and cleanliness. All right, let's roll this. Hello, Chameleon Wranglers. This is Bill Strand, and today we're going to be talking about setting up a quarantine cage. Now, when would you need a quarantine cage? Because I keep talking about how you should get a captive hatched chameleon and work with a breeder. That's true, but there may come a time where, number one, you start a breeding project, and so you may have to bring in wild-caught blood, or else you're just being cautious. Just because you get a captive-bred chameleon doesn't mean they don't have parasites. Quarantine is actually the best thing to do whenever you bring a new chameleon into your collection. Of course, the purpose of quarantine is to make sure that that chameleon is healthy, and you can do all of your checks to make sure there's no parasites that could go to other chameleons in your collection. While we chameleon keepers, we don't keep chameleons together. If they are in the same room, our hands go from cage to cage when we maintain the cage or feed the chameleons. And so we need to be aware of everything we do. So what I've got behind me is a couple of cages with some wild-caught chameleons that I'm going through the fecal tests to check for parasites. And so until I know that they're clean, I'm going to be very careful. And this is how I set up a cage when I'm being careful. So the first thing I do is I imagine the cage in halves. I have a front half and a back half. And in the front half, I'm going to put these plants because I want a wall of plants as a visual barrier. And in the back half, I'm going to have a network of branches, and that's going to be the perching area. Now, for the plants, I specifically pick plants that aren't going to drape over. The spider plants are perfect because they grow up. Yes, they have little babies that come off the side, but what I do is I make sure all of them come to the front side. And so there's nothing dangling on the back side because I don't want anything to be in the way of the poop when it falls down to the floor. As you know, the poop is where the parasites are going to be putting their eggs, their oocysts, and their infectious stages looking for a new host. And we have to make sure that those don't find our chameleon again. The most common way that parasites reinfect a host is by the oral route. And so what we're trying to avoid is the poop hitting any surfaces that the chameleon might lick. Those are the leaves. When using the spider plants where the leaves go up, there's much less chance of any of those leaves coming into contact with poop. Now, just for fun and demonstration purposes, I did use a pothos, which is actually one of the worst plants to use in a situation like this because of the big leaves can both catch poop as well as be an attractive place to drink water off of. So what I've done in this case is I have taken all of the leaves and I have put them down the front. So there's no leaves in back that can catch the poop. And that's one way to do it. I'm also strategic in how I do the perching branches behind the plants. You'll notice that I'm as careful as possible that I don't have branches on top of each other. And so if the chameleon poops, it's not going to hit the branch below it where the chameleon might walk through it. And finally, I feed them in a way that minimizes the chance that anything can get out of the feeder dish. And so to feed, I use this feeder run cup. This is very much like the design that I originally came up with in 2002. All I do is take a milk carton and I carve it out, put something that the insects are going to crawl on the back, some drainage holes in the bottom, and what I have is a very cheap feeder run cup that I can throw away afterwards. I can clean it, I can throw it away. And of course, there's the little paper clip hanger on the back, and so it's a inexpensive and easy to work with. As far as what I feed quarantine chameleons, I actually like to feed dubia and superworms. I avoid crickets because I don't want things that'll jump out of the feeder run cup, and so I avoid crickets. I avoid hissers because they can climb up the sides. Simply put, I just don't want any feeder insects to be able to get down to the bottom of the cage, even though I discourage the chameleon from going down there by not having my network of branches down there. You know these are chameleons. They will darn well go wherever they want. And so I don't want to have anything at the bottom that will attract them. Other than that, when you're bringing in a wild-caught chameleon or a chameleon that's going to be nervous, I suggest a solid side cage. At the very least, have a visual barrier. In this is a Dragon Strand tall hybrid cage, and it's got these PVC sides. And so this is a perfect cage to quarantine a chameleon in. Thank you very much for joining me here, and good luck quarantining your chameleon. It's worth it to do it. I know it's a pain in the butt to do, and it's a lot of work to be careful with your hands and what you touch, but it's worth it. I suppose I'll do one last reminder here. Be very careful about your hands and the latches of your cage. And what I mean by this is if you go into the cage and you're messing with it and you're picking up poop, you're maintaining or whatever, you know you need to clean your hands. So what do is you come out, you close the cage, you latch it, you go in, you wash your hands, and then you come back with the food or whatever you're going to do. You unlatch the cage and then you go in. But that latch is the important part, because if you were cleaning your cage and you got something on your hands and then you went and you latched the cage, you transferred whatever oocysts are you had on your hands to the latch. And so going and washing your hands is wonderful, but the second you come back and touch that latch, you are now transmitting parasites to wherever you touch. So close the cage with your elbow, maintain the cage with gloves on, and then take the gloves off before you latch the cage closed. We interrupt this video for a quick tutorial from an EMT on how to remove gloves without contaminating yourself.
Let's talk about the proper way to remove gloves without passing the contaminants onto your bare skin. Assume that the gloves are covered with some nasty that you don't want on your skin. So, the outside layer of the glove needs to never touch your bare skin. So when you take off your gloves, you don't do this. You see, I've smeared whatever is on this all onto my skin. You grab the palm of your hand like this, and then you pull the glove off. Ball up the glove in this hand, and then take your finger, and it's much easier to get under the glove if you go like this. If you try to get under like this, you're going to probably miss and smear your hand all over what's on this glove. Put your finger in like this, and you have now taken off your gloves safely.
And now back to your regularly scheduled video. Just be aware that whatever you touch, you could be transporting oocysts, infectious worms to wherever else you are in the room. And yes, I am now brushing up against a plant that's in a quarantine cage, so I'm going to have to be careful about where my shoulder goes. One final thought on this video. I know it may surprise many of you that I made extensive use of living plants. And I'm doing this, I specifically chose to do this because I believe that is better for the chameleon mentally to help them acclimate and adjust to this new environment. It's a personal decision that I have made. I fully realize, and if you use live plants, you'll fully have to realize that you may end up having to throw those plants away. If there's any pathogens detected, any parasites or anything, you can't clean that out of the dirt or the leaves, and so you will have to throw those plants away. This is why many people use plastic plants in the quarantine situation, because those can be disinfected. So, personal decision on my part. I just wanted to explain why I'm doing it, and that yes, I fully realize I will probably have to throw away those beautiful plants. It'll break my heart, but that's what's required. Even though I've been doing acclimating wild-caught chameleons for decades, every time one comes in, it is a lot of work. And so, even though everybody, I'm telling you how to do it, I am going to discourage you from getting yourself in a position where you have to do it unless you're doing a breeding project. So, Mike, what'd you think?
I thought it was fantastic. I really enjoy that you're putting the chameleon's needs in front of yours. And I think that's something that a lot of breeders and new keepers to the hobby kind of disregard. As you said, you put the spider plants right at the very front of the enclosure, providing that visual barrier, because a lot of chameleons come in wild caught and they're terrified of humans. So having that visual barrier will definitely allow them to go about their natural behaviors a little bit with a little bit more ease and not have to worry about seeing this big scary primate walking around their enclosure. I think that is fantastic, and it's great. I would have never thought. It's great to see that you had the branches going pretty much like they don't cross each other, so as you mentioned, the poops and things don't have anywhere to bounce off of, and that is critical for the prevention of the passing of pathogens, viruses, parasites, all that. Having a straight fall straight to the bottom of the enclosure for you to be able to take out and clean is fantastic.
Yeah, and everybody just remember, when that poop falls, go ahead and get it as soon as you can, because there are some parasite life cycles where those eggs will hatch, and the infectious stage is the worm that hatches out of those eggs. And so get that poop out of there before it has any chance to do anything.
Now, how often are you... I know you said you want to clean it as often as you can, or whenever you see waste down there, but is there a general rule? Like, are you cleaning with different products every so often? Are you using like a 10% bleach solution or a 5% bleach solution? What what would you recommend cleaning the bottom of their enclosure with?
Yeah, actually, I like to use the bleach solution. I do a spot clean and then a little bit of the bleach. I know the bleach solution doesn't kill everything. And, coccidia is really hard to kill. So it's a combination of, if I need to get a sample and I know what I'm dealing with, if I'm dealing with coccidia, then I have to go be a whole lot more careful than if I just have some nematodes in there. But I'll do a spot check. Let's just say I don't know what I'm dealing with. I'll do a spot clean, and I'll go in with a little bit of the bleach solution. And this works okay when we're dealing with a cage that's 4 foot tall, because of course you've got fumes, and so you got to be really careful about how that is done. With my cages, I have pull-out floors, and so anything I do, I like to do outside of the cage. So I'll take out the floor and I'll put it out in the sun and scrub it down, and then put it back in clean. So everybody with their different cages will have to figure it out, what works for them.
Awesome. Just the important thing is to get it out as fast as you can, like you mentioned. It's not something that you want to let sit in there, have a few poops sitting at the bottom, especially with the wild-caught imports. It is critical that you're getting that stuff out. And if this was me doing it, I would also try and get some samples to get it tested by a vet.
Yep. Or
even if you have a home test kit, some of you hobbyists out there, you might be able to see some of the things. So I would definitely recommend doing that.
And I don't know, nobody knows the answer to this question, at least that I know of, but there is, human hookworms, when they hatch and they get into the larval stage, they're active. They actively search out their host. They can travel 4 feet, and then they'll get up on top of a grass or rocks. They'll get to the highest point in their area, and they'll wait for a human being to walk by so they can latch on, and they go in through the skin.
Wow.
Natural life cycle. That's why latrines are 6 feet deep, and you don't let them get full beyond 4 feet, because that is exactly how far the human hookworm larvae can travel looking for its next host. Thing is, we don't know why 4 feet. They stop at 4 feet, but we don't know why. And so they still have up to 6 weeks of energy to look for humans. And so the question is, reptile hookworms, do they do the same thing? Apparently, they still retain the ability to go through the skin. And so that, at least with the references that I can find, that is believed to be able to happen. So if they retain that ability, do reptile parasites or reptile hookworms also retain the ability to be mobile? And so quarantine takes on a completely different thing when you start thinking about that these parasites may be actively searching for your reptile. And you imagine the thought of all of a sudden, if you have these things hatch inside your cage, them all climbing up the walls of the cage looking for your chameleon. So, so I got to say, there's no paper describing this. Mm-hmm. This is just a scenario. We know this to be the case with human hookworms. We know that inside and out. We don't know if the reptile hookworms retain this ability, but if they do, that really changes the rules of warfare now, doesn't it?
No kidding. Well, if you think about it, and assuming they are the same as human hookworms and can travel that far, then it almost begs the question of, well, then shouldn't your quarantine caging be at least 4 feet away from any other quarantine cage? I know you see it all the time where people have, even if they have a quarantine room, they have the cages all lined up right next to each other. Mm-hmm, but if this becomes true, or if there's some findings of the actual motility of these hookworms, ooh man, that's gonna make chameleon quarantine and reptile quarantine quite miserable.
Yeah, scientists, could somebody check this out? Because
somebody get on this.
Because I'm thinking that it would actually be surprising if they didn't have that ability. Because, I mean, why wouldn't they? If they retain the same ability to be able to go in through the skin, then it would follow that they would expect to be able to find a reptile to get in through their skin. And so, but I think the answer is to clean immediately, because at least the human hookworm, it takes 2 molts to get to the infection stage. In between that time, it hatches and it's just eating the microbes within the poop. So you have time, just not a lot of time. So
how quickly do they go through those 2 molts?
I wish I had that number. I think it's like it's days.
Okay.
Days or a week or something like that. So it's not a lot of time, but it's certainly enough. If the reptile parasite follows that life cycle, then we have a little bit of time to clean the poop. So if we're checking every day, we should be fine.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of, for the viewers out there, that's the conclusion here is don't let it sit. Clean it as fast as you can, or even just once a day. That's the goal here.
Yeah. And once again, we talk about we don't like to have substrate trays in the cage, and that's because we don't want water and poop to be there together, because once the water and poop get together, everything spreads. And, bacteria is bad enough. But when you start spreading parasites, direct life cycle parasites, ooh, yeah, that gets kind of ugly.
Recipe for disaster right there.
All right, Mike. I promised you when I invited you to come on, I promised you that I would introduce you to a very cool species of chameleon. And
I'm still trying to find out what that is.
Well, you are about to find out. It is Furcifer willsii, or willsii. I'm not sure what it is. Also called the Canopy Chameleon. Have you ever heard of that?
I have heard of it, but truth be told, I don't really know what it looks like or how big, small it is. So let's dig into this. I can't wait.
Yeah. Now, I'm letting you know, I am not like doing. This isn't a bait and switch. I've been accused of that before, to where I do a profile on a chameleon that nobody ever is going to see in their entire life, and just because I think it's cool. So this is not the case. The reason why this is a special, I'm bringing this on the show, and because it's special for general interest, is because Furcifer willsii is being now bred within under the care of a number of breeders, at least in the U.S. and in captivity. And so if they are successful, which it looks like they're getting successful, eventually it would be a species available to the general public, and it would be a captive bred established species, meaning that we wouldn't have to take them from the wild, and you would get a very well-started, no parasites and no acclimation necessary baby chameleon, just like you do panther chameleons. And so it's an opportunity that may be coming in a couple of years. So I'm going to introduce you now, and I guarantee you will love this species. And the breeder that we're going to be talking to is someone who has pioneered this species in captivity, and that is Tim Marks. So let's bring Tim on. Tim, I promised Mike that we would be introducing him to a very cool new species of chameleon, and you're the one to talk to on this. How about you go ahead and let us know what you're going to be presenting today?
Sure. So probably for the past maybe 5 years, I've been working with a new chameleon species for the hobby. They've been around. They're not terribly popular. In the last few years, they've become more commonly imported, but not necessarily commonly kept. The chameleon is called the Canopy Chameleon. So that is Furcifer willsii, or Furcifer willsii, however you want to say it. They are little. They are Furcifers, so that means they're very active, like a panther chameleon. They're very active. They're not particularly shy. And hopefully, they can be pretty reasonably easy to establish for the chameleon and pet market as a commonly available captive bred species. So I've been working now for a few years. We're not quite there. Hopefully soon.
All right. Well, so most of us are used to panther chameleons, veiled chameleons, maybe even Jackson's chameleons. If you were to give us an idea of what a willsii is like, I guess we'll call them a canopy chameleon or willsii.
Yep.
How would you compare it to someone who has just a beginning experience with chameleons?
So they're going to behave similar to a panther chameleon in the sense that they don't mind being out in plain view all day. They don't necessarily run around their cage a whole lot. They're pretty methodical about where they're going and why they're going there. They're not like a Kaluma where they kind of will sit around in one spot for a while. Or do particular patterns. I mean, we've all seen Parsons that every morning they go up here and then they come back down here and they kind of run a circuit throughout the day. They're a little more random, but what makes a Furcifer and especially a canopy chameleon really fun is that they're small, but they're not so small as to be delicate. You can keep them in a small enclosure. They do quite well in, we use the Leap Habitat's 15 by 17 by 24 inch enclosures, and they seem to be really, really happy within those enclosures.
All right, so Tim, you've got a canopy chameleon that you're going to introduce us to.
Yes. So this is my favorite male. He's a very average sized male canopy chameleon. He's sitting here right next to my computer, and there he is.
Okay, nice. So that is a beautiful chameleon. And how come we don't see that chameleon or know about that chameleon?
You know, your guess is as good as mine. They show up on the import pricing lists. They seem to be, as of right now, more of like a specialist demand. You know, if you've seen photos from myself or from some of the importers who are trying to sell them, you might have heard of them, but they're nothing like a panther. They're nothing like a veiled. They're even nothing like a carpet, which you might think they'd be a little similar to a carpet. Yeah. They're not, because they actually, the canopy chameleons live in the same environment as a Parsons chameleon. So even though they're a Furcifer, which is, as we know, is a different genus than Kaluma and has very different behavior, extremely different morphology, different evolution. They're adapted for the environment that you might find well, actually, they come from the exact same rainforest as the Kaluma Parsonii Christopher. So Andasi Bay on the east coast of Madagascar, and they live high up in the trees, which means they get some cooler temperatures and a lot of wind shear, and they're also the first to be exposed to any kind of weather front moving in. But what I've learned is that also means that they're the first to be able to bask in the sunlight. So I've done a lot of research. I actually visited Andasi Bay myself, and over the years I've really, put together a little bit of a husbandry checklist for what I think has been working for the Furcifer willsii. And once you've got it all dialed in, and it's not that different than a conventional panther chameleon or anything else, but once you understand the nuances and have it dialed in, I haven't had any problems with them. And this particular guy is a wild caught. You will not be able to find captive bred, unfortunately.
Dang it.
To my understanding, I have the only 2 living captive bred Canopy Chameleons in the world. I mean, I've asked people, I've broadcast that, like, hey guys, I have these. Does anyone else have any? And even getting to that point. So what was different was the incubation parameters. So we might want to touch on that a little later, but my incubation was obviously done wrong because the babies didn't hatch for 2 years, and out of 25 eggs, only 2 babies survived. And the good news is one of those babies has laid 2 clutches, and the other baby is now gravid. So they're no longer babies; they're a year old. And I would love to show you those 2 girls because.
Well, yeah, we need to see the female.
Yes. So here, just, last chance. Here is a male. He has a little bit of his razzle dazzle colors, which are the black polka dots. When he's completely calm, he will be all green with the white stripes. He is calming down a little bit before your eyes. And let's go ahead and put this guy away. This guy, if you want, Bill, we can talk about some of the more advanced topics, such as illnesses, particularly upper respiratory infection, which is very common in imported Canopy Chameleons. But so if you want to talk about that, let me know. But let me grab my female, and I'll be right back with her. So we've got a female Canopy Chameleon. And she's showing her, somewhat darker colors. Now, what I will say about this one, so this is one of my captive breds. These 2, both of them that I have, are definitely smaller than my wild-caught adult. And I believe that their slow growth rate and smaller size is to do with the long incubation period. She also happens to have somewhat of a bone defect above her eye, which causes her eye turret to sit recessed a little bit more in her skull. And again, I attribute that to the poor parameters during incubation, which cause the incubation to go too long. An issue that I think I have resolved as of now. But the issue, of course, is there's very few people that have successfully bred, had them lay, and I know of one person that has hatched them, and that would be Francois Lebert. And so he and I communicate. Unfortunately, he had a friend, Dieter Bretz, who did have experience, and Dieter and I communicated extensively about the species, and Dieter passed away about this time last year. So it was sudden, and it was it was really sad and in the middle of this project. So we lost a lot of good information, but
now there's a wide color range in females. What are you seeing?
So what I see is that they're all pretty much the same color, but what colors they turn when they get excited will change. So right now, she's not so much excited as she is upset. And so she's turning darker green, olive green, and you can see those bold stripes on her back. And that is something that the females have that the males do not have. And you'll also notice that the females don't have horns. What both have that you won't be able to make up on this webcam is yellow stripes on their eye turrets, which become very bright as they get more excited. So what I'm going to show you next is, instead of one of my captive bred females, so this girl has laid 8 eggs, and is extremely healthy. What I'm going to show you next is what I would consider a normal size, very healthy, wild-caught female that we have not bred yet. We have not been able to find a receptive period. Oh man, wait till you get me talking about their receptive behaviors, because it is like no other chameleon. Bill, I'm telling you, like, I've never experienced a chameleon that behaves like this. Here is a more conventionally sized female.
Oh,
Okay.
wow. Much bigger.
Yeah. And,
Almost twice the size, would you say?
I would say about 50% to twice the size.
Okay.
And, you know, the other than the size, the behavior is the same. And again, you know, I mean, hey, if the incubation goes wrong, you got a problem. And, you know, I'm lucky to have had 2 out of all of them survive. So I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth, so to speak, but I'm certainly going to, it's been my kind of mission for the last 3 years to fix that and try and have a better go at it. And I'm happy to say we probably have 30 or 40 eggs from multiple different pairings, including some F1.5s from our captive bred females.
And do you see green females and yellow females?
So the yellow, they all pretty much look like this during the day. A little brighter because, again, she's a little stressed out. But when they breed, they'll turn, the gravid colorations are brown with bright yellow.
Okay.
The yellow color, you will see her display bright yellow stripes, but not if you're going to take her out of the cage. If you're going to take her out of the cage, this is what she's going to look like. Here she is on my keyboard. This is what she's going to look like. And, you know, they're very active chameleons. They're not necessarily calm chameleons. But unlike a carpet chameleon, they don't run away.
All right, Mike. What do you think about these chameleons?
Ooh. All right. Well, first things first, I am very intrigued, and as somebody who's looking into the species, the first few considerations that always go through my mind are what does pricing look like, even for wild caught? If somebody is looking to, like myself, was looking to get a 2.2 or a 3.3, something like that, what would I be looking at in terms of price, and how analogous would you say are they to things like the misting schedules and such that you have to expose like Kaluma parsoni and stuff to?
All right. So first things first, price. Obviously, it's going to be variable. So I'm semi-aware of the wholesale prices coming in from imports, but I'm not. Rather than disclosing that, I'll say that the retail pricing seems to be between $150 and $300 a piece.
Okay.
Anywhere within that range is reasonable. If there are animals that have been in, you know, that haven't sold for a while, that's when you're going to start seeing the $150. And obviously you pay a premium if you want to get them right after they come in from Madagascar. And that's where you'll see the higher prices. But if you're looking, what I will say about willsii is that if you're looking to invest in a group of willsii, it should be done with the intent to do the best job you can at reproducing, because they come from a very specific range in Madagascar. We know very little about them in captivity. And we do have just a little bit of information now from, you know, the last 5 years of me keeping them, and I wouldn't even say a handful of others. I would say like 2 other people keeping them.
Wow.
The good news is that we have enough information to keep them healthy. So to lead into your next question is how analogous as they are they to Parsonii? Not at all. I would ignore the sheer size of the enclosure that you would keep a Parsons chameleon pretty much means that you're not going to be keeping a Canopy Chameleon in a similar structure. I would say I would start with the basic care parameters of a carpet chameleon. So that means we're talking about, let's say 76 up to 78 degrees in the habitat during the day, during the summer, up to maybe 72 degrees during the day during the winter. And then during the summer evenings, I would say down to 68 degrees. During the winter evenings, down to 62 degrees. And unlike carpet chameleons, I would provide, especially during the summer, but it wouldn't hurt for during the winter, about 2 to 3 hours in the middle of the day for a basking period. So I turn on like a 25-watt mini heat lamp on all these enclosures for about 2 to 3 hours during the middle of the day. And I find that that is actually a big thing that canopy chameleons need. Whereas the carpet chameleons, in my experience, really don't need the basking, the basking situation. The winter drop is critical to inducing receptivity come spring. So, or receptiveness. Bill can correct me on that one. If you want,
sounds good.
Yeah, if you do intend to breed the animals, you will want to take advantage of a seasonal temperature change. Now, this is kind of becoming commonplace in the chameleon community as we learn what the triggers are to breed our exotic chameleons, and we have definitely found that day-night variation, summer-winter variation in the adults is critical, and even in the eggs. So to get eggs to hatch, you need the same stuff. But yeah, to keep an adult successfully, those would be the temperature parameters. I would use a 5.0 UVB lamp, like our Leap 5.0 German-made lamps. And this may be considered a controversial subject, but at this stage, I believe firmly in it, that the UV exposure can be modulated in terms of its effect on the reptile and the generation and the synthesis of vitamin D3. It can be modulated both by varying the intensity or the duration of the exposure. And so we have adjusted the duration of our UV exposure to have an offset from the daylight bulbs. And so our UV only comes on for about 6 hours a day, even though our daylight lamps come on for about 11 to 13, depending on whether we're talking about winter or summer. But we do this.
You go as 11 hours?
The lowest we go of full daylight exposure is 11 hours during the winter, because that perfectly simulates the Andasi Bay region of Madagascar, which is just the area we've chosen to replicate. And the highest is 13. And then across the entire year, we actually run what's called we call it an offset. So the offset for our UV bulbs is somewhere between 2 and 3 hours. So 2 to 3 hours after the daylight turns on, our UV turns on. And 2 to 3 hours before the daylight turns off, our UV turns off. So
and do you
with
find them going to bask in that? Sorry.
We honestly, willsii, I only see them basking under heat.
What is your supplementation schedule, if any?
So we're supplementing approximately once a week with a multivitamin supplement. And these days, we are dosing calcium, every feeding or every few feedings. But with calcium, you can go every feeding. It's not really critical. Lately, we've actually, ever since we started scaling back on our vitamin supplementation, believe it or not, we've been using Reptivite, which is a multivitamin supplement that many have talked about. It's also been villainized as being too high in vitamins. Well, yeah, it is if you use it every day, but when you use it once a week, twice a month, it's fantastic because it actually has every vitamin in it, including vitamin A. It's a very complete vitamin supplement. Hey, look, what works for me doesn't necessarily work for all. And it's not to say that I haven't achieved success with a more typical Repashy, calcium supplementation or low D or plus. But these days, it's not for us with the UV exposure we do. And we're always changing our bulbs and we're always monitoring. So they're always exposed to UV. Okay. It's not about D3, and it is about over vitamin supplementation.
How is this this species as far as water? How much of a thirsty species is this?
Okay, so oh man, this is a great topic. So I see Canopy Chameleons licking leaves all the time.
Okay.
If you miss them, they'll go around licking the terrarium for hours after you missed. I've also seen them and heard from personal communication with Michael Nash, who keeps them. We've seen them eating sap, and
Sap?
yes, they will lick sap. They will also lick the juice and the honey created from mealybugs. So Canopy Chameleons have a sweet tooth. I told you these guys are different, and I am serious. They are different.
Can I stop you there?
Wow.
What sap are they? Have you found them licking? Like from what plants?
The sap was a Michael Nash observation, and I don't remember what plant it was that was weeping, but it's definitely something we could figure out. I've seen them lick the undersides of leaves and lick the mealybug honey.
Interesting.
And it kind of goes along with the fact that, I see them licking everything. I've never seen a chameleon that licks as many things. And so, they remind me of my dog. They just go around licking leaves. And it's not just like a lick for a taste. The little bloop that panther chameleons do. It's an actual repeated licking up of a leaf systematically. So, hey, I don't know what it means, but it's interesting.
Do you think that they do well with the standard 50% daytime humidity? Okay,
yeah, humidity. So 50% is no problem. I would never go below that. We tend to run 60 plus in our reptile room. We miss twice a day. We really try not to over mist because the reptile room in general has a decently high humidity. I never see problems with dehydration in our animals. And at night, we're dropping our temps and we're going up to 80-85% humidity at night. So it was described prior to the last 5 years that Canopy Chameleons really need a humid environment. My response to that is, I don't think they need a humid environment. I think that the principles of chameleon husbandry of high nighttime humidity and low temperature are particularly important for willsii. Okay. And I think that the daytime humidity can be a little bit higher than what would be considered appropriate for a veiled chameleon.
And so we touched on some very interesting habits as far as eating. How about general diet?
We're feeding them exclusively crickets at the Leap Lab. We've got probably close to 200 animal mouths to feed in the laboratory. And so we stick with what works, and we buy crickets combined with a healthy gut load of kale and potatoes, sweet potatoes, and carrots, and all the good stuff, as well as thoughtful supplementation schedule.
Okay. And anything about their cage specifically that would be attributed to this species? Any sort of behaviors or needs that they exhibit beyond, say, carpet or a panther chameleon?
So I would say that the Canopy Chameleon, in my experience with a carpet chameleon, is that you're likely to find it out sitting on a stick in the middle of nowhere in your terrarium. He's perfectly content to do that. With a Canopy Chameleon, I find that they do tend to prefer to sit on a horizontal branch within vegetation. I also find in many cases that they're sitting toward the top of the terrarium. I have even seen, so with some chameleons, if you put into their terrarium what I would consider like an inappropriate plant that, is more just broad-leaved, very little stem, most chameleons will tend to just avoid that entirely, but I've seen Canopy chameleons that just sit on the top of the leaves and just hold the edges and are content to sit on top of a leaf, which kind of goes with the name Canopy Chameleon. It could be just they had no other choice, but in general, I try not to provide that type of planting for them. My favorite plants are, as you would expect, ficus, branching ficuses to fill out the body of the terrarium, peperomia to act as a vining agent and to occupy the bottom of the terrarium, and just a lot of sticks. You know, the more sticks you can provide, the better.
What are the chances that we're going to be able to establish this in captivity, and what would that take?
Okay, so the only people I'm currently in communication with that are having success with Canopy Chameleons are Michael Nash, who you know is a pioneer of modern day innovative, bioactive and bioactive evolutionary husbandry techniques. And I communicate a ton with him, and when he comes up with a new idea, boom, we're implementing it. He is incredible. And then also my good friend Craig Durbin, who is an absolute beast when it comes to his proficiency with Parsons chameleons, and he has a small group of Canopy chameleons that he has successfully bred within the last month as well. Same timing as a lot of my recent breedings, and they came in around the same time. And what both of these guys have in common is that they have experience knowing the nuances behind what a chameleon is doing and what that means for its care. But what it also means, so to make it less black magic, what it also means is that when us chameleon guys geek out and talk about daytime temps, nighttime temps, daytime humidity, nighttime humidity, minimizing the mist cycle, healthy food, bioactive substrate, vitamin supplementation, we're not just saying it to fill the air. This is what actually matters if you want to achieve success. If you pursue a Canopy chameleon and keep it like a veiled, or just assume that you'll be able to read the behavior and give it what it needs, unfortunately, you're probably going to be disappointed in the longevity of the animal. And it's sad because they're very uncommon, and we really need to do the best job we can. So what I would say is that if the three of us are able to get where we've come in the last year, accumulation of 5 years of work, and other people have done it historically too, okay? I would say that we can do this. I just would urge people to just listen and take into consideration the parameters that we're recommending and apply them. But you know what, Bill? You know the big thing? We got to figure out this incubation.
Yeah.
So I am doing something with my eggs that I am really hoping will have worked. They're on the tail end of it. So I'm into the normal development part of the egg incubation, and I really hope I get hatchlings at the 10 month period, because if it goes 15 months, I could be looking at 2 years again. And I know that the neonatal health is going to be, it's not going to be good if the eggs take that long to hatch.
I was just going to say, what would you, kind of sticking along the establishing them in captivity, what would you say to somebody who, whether it's me or somebody with maybe even less experience than me, would you recommend something like this as a pet? I know you said earlier that you'd really like to kind of keep the Furcifer, willsii into the people like yourselves and Bill and the people like Michael that are really trying to establish it and get knowledge in. How do you feel about the random wild imports coming in and landing in somebody's home?
I feel that not that they should be left to. No. I feel that if you are to pursue them, which I wholeheartedly would love to see people do, that you look to the established methods that a handful of us have been using that have worked with success. Bill, I think that's actually a good question for you. I try not to get, into the kind of like ethics of all this. It's certainly an interesting topic, but it's a hobby, and I promote all people to seek enjoyment from it. And my perspective is simply that if you're going to, just please do know that it's a very uncommon species. It is a wonderful species, and that we do have enough money. We do have enough memory of what we've experienced, of what we've done, that you could follow a procedure that might work better. So, I mean, Bill, what do you think about the average person trying a species like this?
What I think is that the complications that we're talking about and everything that we're talking about to understand a species is for breeding it and reproducing it reliably. As far as keeping one as a pet, I have kept these before. I actually have one now. They are wonderful pets, and they're easy to take care of. And so I would say for all of you listening who are interested is don't think about breeding right now. The one thing that is critical for establishing a species in captivity is the F1 generation. People to take in the F1 generation so the breeders can continue what they're doing. If nobody buys the first generation offspring, then the breeders can't continue what they're doing because the whole system is backed up. So if you're at all interested, talking to the people listening and the viewers, please just keep in contact with these breeders, with Tim, Michael, Craig. And when there are babies and they do become available, then that is your time to get involved with a project and get your experience with that F1 generation. When we say F1, we mean the babies of the wild caught, the first captive generation. Get your experience with the F1 generation, and then once you've got that experience under your belt and you want to do breeding, that would be the perfect time to jump into it. And that's where I would stand on that.
That makes total sense, Bill. It's I totally agree. It's easy for me when you talk to me, and you know this. I can't take off my breeder hat. It's really hard for me to look from the perspective of the hobbyist. But you're right. In terms of just maintaining it, all I ever think about is, are my females going to be receptive this season? And if they're not, I did something wrong, even though they're going to be perfectly healthy. But as a pet keeper, you just don't have to worry about that stuff.
And that's my job. When you guys actually are starting to produce, and of course the first ones that are produced are going to be going to other breeders to try to really establish the base. But once there's babies to be going to the general public, that's where I come in, and that's where I talk about the species, and I get the word out and tell people about how to take care of them, and that's where I come in. So you just keep doing your breeding thing. And I'll keep track of what's going on, and I'll activate I'll activate the species marketing mode as soon as you guys are ready.
That's great. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. The only other thing that I thought of is I think I only mentioned it once, so I just wanted to hit on it again. I do think that bioactive is a very appropriate means of keeping any chameleon that can be kept in a smaller enclosure. Really benefits from bioactive. It's more forgiving of overwatering. It's more forgiving of waste buildup. It's even more forgiving if your female does become gravid and you don't know, or came in while caught gravid. Willsii, I have had dig in enclosures, whereas carpet chameleons simply do not dig in enclosures. Just I don't know. I mean, I know carpet chameleons really like sandy substrates, so maybe the substrate in the trim just isn't enough. Willsii seem to be less specific about what they want to dig in. I promise you I would describe one really interesting behavior about the receptivity of canopy chameleons. So this now has been observed in every single captive breeding that I have had as well as now the captive breedings of Michael Nash and Craig Durbin. The male willsiis are almost always eager to breed. They put on their polka dots, they start bobbing their head, they look really cool. They very slowly approach the female. If a female Canopy Chameleon is receptive, she will do from the following two extremes. She will turn around with her tail up and get closer to the male and wait for the male. And I've even seen the females run underneath the male.
Okay.
So I have never observed that in a chameleon species before. It is always a game of the males hunting them down, and they either, the females are either receptive or not. The female Canopy Chameleon, if she is not receptive, immediately turns brown, game is over. And if she is receptive, she does not. And then she very quickly actually pursues the male. So just
okay.
Fascinating, little things, but really unique. They also have, on average, in my experience, a 90-day gestation cycle. So it takes them 90 days. And Michael has experienced as long as 6 months, which we actually believe that she mated, stored the sperm, went through a winter cycle, came out of it, and then utilized the stored sperm. That's our hypothesis.
Okay.
Gotta get the expert. You gotta get the doctor. He is a doctor now. Gotta get him on to go over it. But and then I had one that laid in 30 days. I don't know.
We've got our challenge ahead of us on this little guy.
They're a puzzle.
All right. Well, it is coming time that I need to send Tim off. He has got to get on to his life. And I want to say thank you so much, Tim, for coming on and sharing your progress. This is exciting for the community.
No, I appreciate it. I love talking with Bill just privately, and anytime I have an opportunity to come on the show, it's a real pleasure for me. So before we go, I want to snap a picture of this because I can give it to Bill, because our little Canopy Chameleon has just been taken. It's bedtime for her, and she's been sleeping on top of my webcam this whole time. So
please do.
But no, thanks, guys. And Mike, I mean, this is awesome. I love having you on the show with Bill. Mike, and I've known Mike for a few months now, and I just really see eye to eye with you, Mike. So it's cool to have you here to talk to you.
Likewise, it's dangerous talking with you guys because both of you guys are so passionate about the hobby and chameleons in general that I'm just sitting here like, I want more chameleons.
Yeah. It's a slippery slope if you get bit by the chameleon bug. It's
it is.
They're just so rewarding. Yes, you have to do science and stuff to figure them out, but then you do it, and all of a sudden you're rewarded for it. I mean, it's just great.
It is more than just a hobby where you just do it. It's a personal growth exercise.
Yeah.
So, all right, Tim, thank you very much, and we will see you later.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Take care.
All right, Mike, that is Furcifer willsii. So, did I deliver on my promise?
Yes, you most certainly did. That was a fantastic chat with Tim. I learned a whole bunch, and I think there's probably a little bit of room somewhere behind me that I can potentially get these guys into Canada and maybe start a Canadian version of what Tim's doing down in the U.S.
I think that is a great idea, and I know that there are some there is some import-export that goes on with full CITES paperwork, everybody. We're not talking about anything shouldn't be talking about. Full CITES paperwork between the U.S. and Canada. And so I think it would be awesome to get you and some of the substantial Canadian breeders working with this species. It's such a nice species.
It is, and they're a perfect mix of not too tiny, not even like panther chameleon or female veiled, like not even that size. They're a happy medium. Yeah. They seem to have a very moderate temperature requirement. So I know Tim was mentioning that you don't have to go quite as cool as something like a Jackson's, which can be a little bit harder for especially somebody like myself with a room that has a ton of animals from across the world in it that might not do so well.
It's hard for a lot of us.
Exactly, and that's something that is fantastic to hear. That I was actually very happy to hear from Tim that they don't need to go too cold.
All right, then. What is in the future for Mike Taitula?
What is in the future? Well, hopefully first for willsii.
Yes.
Beyond that,
we're going to get you back into chameleons.
Yes. I am definitely fiending for some more. I'm definitely fiending for more chameleons, and they are a true passion of mine. That's almost where my channel started, was around chameleons. I bred some of the Rampholion, I believe, back in the day. I hatched a little baby.
Very cool.
And grew that one up. So they have been here with the channel forever, and I would really like to get back into them. In the near future, though, lots more builds, lots of stuff happening around the room. Of course, there's also some very rare frogs that I have coming in the next couple weeks. So lots of exciting things, and never a dull moment here.
All right, Mike, if somebody wants to learn more about you and what you do, what are the best social media platforms to check out?
The best social media platforms for me are obviously YouTube. You can catch me there. Yep. I do reply to every single comment. I also do Instagram pretty frequently, alpha.reptile over there. If you just send me a message, I'm down to talk about pretty much anything. Reptiles, life, whatever you got going on. I'm always interested to chat and meet new people, especially in this hobby. So those are the two main ones. I do have a TikTok that I hardly use. I do have Twitter, but and email, of course. Alternatively, you can reach out on our website, thejunglevault.ca. That is Bree and I, my partner and I's business that we sell all of the reptiles and plants and such through.
Mike, I want to thank you so much for coming on and being my co-host. This was a lot of fun.
This has been a dream for me for a long time. I've been listening to the Chameleon Academy since it was the Chameleon Breeder podcast, right when it came out, and it's always been awesome, and I'm thrilled to finally be here. So, thanks for having me.
All right, then we'll see you all later. Bye.
Bye.